missing.
No, you're there.
But from the live one. Well, anyway. Welcome to Special Collection Spooky Unboxing Spectacular. I'm Philip McDonald.
And I'm Taylor Wilford. I am very excited to be here today to talk about some of our spooktacular collections. Boo!
Boo!
Did I scare you?
You did.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, I want to talk about first how we got the idea for this collection, or this collection of materials.
Did we?
Okay, so this is part of the great experience of working in an archive is Phil and I were looking for other materials for a class that we were working on.
Yeah.
And we passed by the witchcraft section of our rare books collection.
That's right.
And I remember we both did a double take and we're like, what are these texts? And why do we have them? And what do they mean for history? So that sort of developed for us this long plan to accumulate a lot of these rare books and manuscript collections and talk about spooky materials, which naturally is perfect for October.
Yeah, and we had so many. Like, we had to cut down a lot. Hopefully we'll be doing this for years to come.
Yeah.
We have so much cool stuff.
We have a lot of great stuff. So Phil's going to get us started today on our first one, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so the first one we have is this really beautiful illustrated version of Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus by Mary Shelley. And so, for those who didn't know, Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, or the ideas of Frankenstein came from a spooky dream she had, and then she was traveling with a group of friends and writers, including Lord Byron, in Switzerland, and they had kind of he started like this kind of game or test or challenge to see who could come up with the best story about the undead, with the theme of the undead. And so this was Frankenstein was her idea, her story. And so this is actually what's really cool about this version of Frankenstein. It's actually the first fully illustrated version of Frankenstein. When it initially came out in 1934, the illustrations are done by Lynn Ward, a wonderful woodcut artist, and he is well known for his wordless novels, kind of like a precursor to the graphic novel that we have in our collections. We have a few of his works, including God's Man, Man's Drum, and Vertigo. But yeah, this is just a beautiful example of woodcuts, and this came out in 1934, so this is post like German Expressionism in film, and so there's a lot of influence into you can see a lot of give and take from film and woodblocks in this time period. And so let's see if we can. Do you want me to try to zoom? What do you think?
Looks good. Just show some of the pages.
Yeah.
And the really, I think one of the really interesting things about not only Lynn Ward's illustrations, but also Frankenstein as a story, is that it translates really well to imagery and these sort of depictions that Lynn Ward is known so well for. And I think especially for people who are visual readers, like I am, having some sort of illustration always helps create that image in your mind of what's happening in a scene.
It helps bring it to life.
It does, yeah. So I really enjoyed this version, and I remember you were talking to me about this recently, about how the concept of like reanimating the dead didn't just appear simply from Mary Shelley's dream vision, but also from scientific endeavors at the time to reanimate the dead and to manipulate life through sort of alchemical and scientific reactions. So I think that also plays really well into Lynn Ward's illustrations and how dark they are. They really like invoke that darkness.
Yeah.
And I absolutely just love looking through really all of his work.
Yeah.
God's Man is a great work as well.
Really beautiful. And for the other ones we have, those are all wordless, right? Like God's Man.
God's Man is definitely
wordless.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a couple of other interesting things about Frankenstein, because I did some research on the early history of this book as a print. Mary Shelley was 18 when it was published. 18 years old.
I did not know that.
Yeah, she was 18 years old, which is fascinating because it's definitely still considered a classical piece of literature today. And they weren't sure about the reception of a woman at the time producing a horror or a sci-fi book. So she published it anonymously. And people had speculated for years after that it was her husband, that Percy.
Yes, Percy. He's a well-known poet, and
right,
yeah,
that he had written it, and it took them quite a long time after she had first published a book at 18 to prove that it was actually her work, which is astonishing background there.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, on the publication of this book, and how difficult it was for her to say, no,
Obviously.
I really did do this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful collection of books that we have, and we do have other illustrated books in the collections that touch on classical literature and famous poets, which we will get into a little bit later.
Yeah. Kind of bookend it with that.
Yes, we will. So that's really cool, and we're gonna move on to the next thing.
Yes. Let's do that.
Okay. And the next thing we have, one of our coworkers has worked pretty extensively with our research comic book collections that we have.
Mm-hmm.
We've started accumulating quite a bit of really exciting comic book collections here in Special Collections. So I asked her, as our resident expert in comics, what are some spooky, really classic stories that we would want to tell for this type of stream? And so she pulled like 20 comics for me.
Yeah.
Again, we had trouble choosing what to go with,
100%.
but one of the texts that really stood out to me in our collections was Tales from the Crypt, which is a really fascinating series of comics produced in the 1950s by an entertainment comics company. And they're called EC Comics for Entertainment Company. And these were originally, we have these in the Research and Study collection of comic books, and the Tales from the Crypt itself was a bi-monthly horror series produced by the comic company, and the stories were inspired by existing works from like Edgar Allan Poe, H.P. Lovecraft, and some other really popular horror / like sci-fi writers of the time. So a lot of these stories are based off of those existing works of literature. Cool. And this is a really interesting story itself in terms of the one that I chose, because there was actually a TV show made called Tales from the Crypt.
That's what I know.
Yes, yeah. And this was the first story they told in the TV series. It's The Man Who Was Death. And super chilling story, actually. We can go ahead and take it out. Yeah. You can flip through some of the pages. Reading about this, even as someone who enjoys scary things, this was pretty chilling to me. But The Man Who Was Death is the comic that we have out here today. And it is the second story in the Crypt of the Terror series, and features Edgar Bauman on his quest to become a public executioner. So essentially, Edgar, he worked as a executioner operating the electric chair in a state prison. And he started to become displeased with the way that the criminal justice system was punishing criminals. So he sat in on a murder trial. That was a really pivotal moment for him in this story, and he disagreed with the jury's verdict. So he decided to take it upon himself and become sort of like a public executioner, and sort of quoting his words in the novel, he wanted to become fate's instrument and bring inevitable doom upon the wicked while relishing every second of it. So just he came to the conclusion that he was sort of being tested by this higher power, and it was his like civic but also moral responsibility to kill people he deemed as wrongdoers. So he became sort of like judge, jury, and executioner, and he really wanted to operate outside of the laws of society to do so. I don't want to give away the ending, but if you are interested, I definitely recommend. He does have a very ironic twist of fate sort of plot at the end. But these are like so indicative of 1950s like horror comics at the time, in terms of just like the coloring they used and the story that they told. And I really enjoy it because it is also at the same time sort of a social criticism of the death penalty and of those who facilitate it, which at the time was also a really important discussion. It still is. So, yeah, I really like the Tales from the Crypt. We have more as well. If anyone is interested in our comics collection, we have more from the Tales from the Crypt, as you can see here.
Yeah.
And we also have a lot more comics of this sort of variety,
yeah,
which is really great.
Fantastic selection of comic books. And we just got a shout out on the YouTube live stream from Laura Abrams, our special collections colleague, who helped us so much with the selection. So yes, these are super creepy, and
yes.
Thank you,
Laura.
Thank you for passing them along.
Okay. Good.
So the next one we're gonna do is called Books of Monsters. I know that sounds very scary, but it's actually, I find, quite adorable. It's a book. It's a collection of photographs of insects and spiders. So if you are a little bit squeamish with spiders, I will give you this is your warning for a little bit. So it's also known as Portraits and Biographies of a Few of Inhabitants of Woodland and Meadow. It's by David and Marion Fairchild, and it was published by the National Geographic Society in 1914. So he is an American botanist who was responsible for the introduction of more than 200,000 exotic plants and varieties of established crops in the U.S., and Marion Bell Fairchild was a naturalist, author, and horticulturalist.
Also, she was the daughter of Alexander Graham Bell.
What?
Yes. So
the Bell, got it.
Yeah, Marion Bell Fairchild was Alexander Graham Bell's daughter.
I would also keep my name.
Really cool.
Yeah. That is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea behind this book, and it's in their introduction, the authors state that these fascinating little creatures are not our enemies, which I agree.
Mm-hmm.
And so another really cool thing that you pulled out of the text is that the way the photographs are done. So before this, as you can see, let me spread right here, a lot of photographs, and we have a lot of examples like this in our collections as well, are photographs of insects and spiders being shot from the top down, so you can kind of see their body layout, their what's the word I'm trying to think of?
Anatomy.
Yes, that layout. And here's a really cool, I don't know if you can see it that well, but here's a really cool image of them taking these photos. So the idea was that they really want to get it from the front of the animal, so that you can get kind of like them in action in the wild. And so here's this like super long lens camera with a plate at the end or a platform for the insect to be on. So let's get to, again, this is your last warning. The first section is Spider World, so if you do not like spiders, you might want to look away for a little bit.
Anyone with arachnophobia.
Yeah, truly. But yeah, I don't know. It's adorable to me. Look at that little friend.
He looks so great.
Have you seen the Spider Milo? They kind of got this animator, I believe for Pixar. I believe their nephew was scared of spiders, so that they created this like adorable spider and voiced it by the nephew.
See, I really don't like spiders. I mean, I'm not gonna like squish one that I see. I'll probably run away first, but I really like the way that they shot these photographs, because to me, like, especially the first photo that you just showed, like, it does look cute.
It's super cute.
Like, it looks really cute, and it's definitely a different approach, especially around the early 1900s to view these not as specimens for research, but as actual creatures. The interesting thing for me, too, is that he also they both continuously refer to them as monsters. Which I understand he's doing from sort of like a metaphorical standpoint. A literary standpoint. But yeah, I think he is trying to play on words there, saying like they are viewed as monsters, but here's how they actually appear to us, and they are not as monstrous as you think, which is a really, really sweet, I think. And I like that they took this approach and specifically tried to change that narrative around insects.
100%. They get a bad rap for how much they do for us. And now I'm into the bug section, or the insect section, and so we got a lanternfly bug. This is hilarious. NPR was talking about lanternfly bugs a couple days ago. They're originally from Asia, and they're kind of like taking over. I can't remember the state where it's a huge issue right now, but the lanternfly bug is like a huge issue for crops right now in the United States.
Oh, I didn't hear that. Well,
Ooh, beetles.
Yeah, and another really sort of along the same lines, like, interesting aspect of this for me is that the authors do spend quite a bit of time explaining the sort of environmental benefits of having certain insects around. They talk a lot about how it's important to gigantic industries, in their words.
That's what they were, yes.
And how sort of they can contribute and do contribute to nature in really fascinating ways. So I feel like it's just a very humanistic perspective on these little monsters as they describe them.
Yeah, and this one is a spotted vine chaffer in flight, but I think that's really cool that they were able to capture the beetle like in flight, so you can see the wings coming out of its armor. I
do want to throw this out there because I read the full preface and introduction. Do you know how, besides the like photograph method they use with the long camera, did you read how they took these photos?
No.
So if anyone's upset by anything relating to harming animals or insects,
that's probably why I didn't read it. Yeah.
But wait, do you want a minute on it?
No, go for it.
Okay, so
they're gonna find out anyway.
Yeah, they actually they killed these bugs.
That's what I thought.
They ingested they had them ingest a poison right before they put them on the little platform with the cameras.
So
right before though, right before. So they were still technically like lifelike and moving around, but they were also dying.
Gotcha.
So that's another thing to consider, I would say, with scientific research and inquiry is that you don't always see what's on the other side of the lab or the camera. Or
sure, absolutely.
And it is definitely not a unique approach to anyone photography with insect photography at this time, anyways.
Yeah. Or animal.
Or animal photography, right? Yeah. That is something to consider. Another layer to this, if you will, is like, sure, they're monsters and they're also really important. But the authors also believe that we have dominion over them.
Yes.
And, that we sort of, as humans, are in the process of domesticating all of these creatures to suit our purposes.
Got you. This is just an extension of that, like you said.
Really interesting.
I'm not surprised. Honestly, not surprised, especially since it's from the National Geographic.
Yeah, I was a little horrified to read that because they look so cute.
They are so cute.
But that is what's happening behind the scenes. Okay, let's grab the next box. There you go.
Sweet. So what collection is this from again?
This is from the Claire Necker papers and Cat Artifacts. Claire Necker was an author who wrote several books, at least 4 or 5, on the history of cats, and she had a real deep fascination with cats and the occult. She had a book that she published called Supernatural Cats, and then another one called The Cat's Got Our Tongue. So she was, a lot of her papers have to do with her research on these various books that she published, including these fascinating prints that we have here by Goya. And Phil, I know you know a lot more about this than me if you want to get started.
We'll get started on the Goya. So she has images and copies of other art from different artists, but there's a large chunk from Goya, especially in. So let me see if you want to pull out any more from that. But these are from the Los Caprichos prints that he did. So these were done towards the end of the 18th century. There's definitely a time of turmoil in Spain. The French were exiled, and then the Spanish came back, and so this is also going into Goya's dark period. So he's in the latter stages of his life, and so these were etchings that he created, and they went into a book that were published in 1799, and eventually he had to take them out of circulation because he was afraid about being brought into the Inquisition. And he had a long history of connection to the royal family. He was a court artist for generations. And so cats are usually used, and Taylor will talk about this a little bit, but for imagery of superstition. So that's why you see a lot of cats in these depictions of the prominence of superstition in French society at that time, and kind of other part of these etchings are to talk about like the ignorance and inabilities of the various members of the higher class in Spain at the time. And so again, when you attack these certain classes, that's why he was worried about retaliation. So that's why he took them out of circulation. But they obviously lasted. Did you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, I actually wanted to also give a little bit of context for this. So, when we started researching sort of the connection between cats and their representation in occult lore, studies, etc., I was really wanted to go back further and understand up to Goya why particularly European culture and also the Americas soon after had labeled cats as demonic or satanic or harbingers of evil and doom. It sounded odd to me as a cat lover today. I said, why do they not like them so much? So I did some research way before these were made and found that written records link black cats to the occult as far back as the 13th century when the official Catholic Church document Vox in Rama was issued by Pope Gregory in 1233. And so in this declaration, the Pope declared that cats are the incarnation of Satan, and he decreed this like really famous line, which is, "Thou shalt not suffer a cat to live." And so that decree also marked the beginning of the Inquisition and the church-sanctioned witch hunts at the time. And so it's a really interesting, like, symbolic cultural movement where not only are women being equated to witches and heretics, but also the cats sort of got tangled up in that as their familiars or as also harbingers of evil. So that's sort of the long lore of cats being evil, essentially.
So would you say Pope Greg was a dog person?
It might have been. I mean, he said some really brutal things about cats. That's a good point. But there are a couple works here that play on that
100%.
idea. 100%. So Goya here in this one, this photo is or this etching is called "In the Dream of Reason Produces Monsters," and you can see that right there is Goya. This is actually the author or the printer here. This is Goya himself at his desk. He's writing. And he fell asleep, and he's actually surrounded by what at the time, so like the 19th century, they considered to be symbols of necromancy and evil, which is a owl at the top here. There's bats flying around, and then there's a cat right at his foot, symbolizing that the cat is really the one pushing him to dream of evil and then to take that into his life and do evil deeds. So that's a really interesting one, and probably at least the one I was most familiar with. But there's another one up here called I believe it's called "There It Goes." Yeah. And you'll see that it is it's a devil who's holding onto a staff that a cat is biting at the top. So again,
and is that a witch in there too? Like, do we have like the?
Yes.
We have everything that Pope Greg doesn't like.
Yes.
Satan, women, and cats.
Yep, it's the trifecta right there. So there's a cat at the top. There's a woman who's depicted as the witch. Closest to the cat, of course. And then there's the like demonic Satan-like figure. And he, of course, is playing on a lot of these themes of the time and cultural. It's very culturally relevant, but he was, like you said, simultaneously making criticisms of like his life and his society that he was working in within that time in Spain. So I just think these are really, really fascinating, especially when you take into account how long this history is.
Oh, yeah.
Women, witchcraft, cats, demons, and you'll see that theme throughout pretty much everything we pulled on witchcraft today. Which is concerning, but also interesting. So I was really glad that we had found those and were able to point them out for researchers. Okay. Are you ready to move on?
Yeah, let's do it. Thank you for the outfit shout out, Colin.
Thank you.
And I agree, Virginia, the creatures were very cute.
They're so cute. Okay, the next one is in French, and full disclaimer, I don't speak that language.
Okay.
Neither do you, right?
Yeah, I don't.
Okay, so I'm going to try to pronounce this the best that I can. Phil, you want to grab this one?
Sure, yeah.
Rest. So this is La Demon-manie de sorciers, I think.
Crushed it.
Thank you. But basically what that translates to roughly is the demon-mania of witches. So very, very similar connection to
Witchy stuff.
What we just talked about. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this was written by Jean Bodin, who was a French jurist and political philosopher. The first text was, the first edition of this was published in 1580, so it's from the 16th century. And it is, I mean, we both looked into this pretty extensively, like a landmark work in, probably not the best way, but it was the first text that provided a legal definition of what witchcraft is and how you could prosecute it in the judicial system of France. So, really interesting text, and it is considered by historians as the inaugurator of the late 16th and early 17th century trend for discussing the persecution of witches and creating guides and manuals on how to do so. So it's
gotta learn from somewhere,
right? Well, the first page, I think we read something about like it roughly translates in the first page into like the vulgarity of women in witchcraft. Again, harking back to women sort of being othered in this time period, along with the cats, sadly.
Or less than.
Considered less than. But this work was based on his own experience, Bodin's own experience as a judge. Full disclaimer again, he provides both this sort of legal perspective, but he also doesn't really hold back on describing how to track witches down and to harm them. So he's pretty graphic on the ways that he describes you should also find the witches and then maybe bring them to trial, maybe not. It's like it's very 16th century witch hunt-esque in that due process and all of those things that we're used to today not happening in 16th century France.
But I mean, you are dealing with witches, so that makes sense why you would want to skip the due process.
And
it's terrifying.
Well, yeah, but another interesting aspect of this is that this sort of like witchcraft, the concerns around witchcraft was also at this time the religious leaders trying to fight against religious dissidents and atheism.
You sure?
People separating from the church, and that sort of tied up into women. If you were separate from the church, or if you showed signs of not being as devout as others, like the crucible, then you were like in the crucible. You were condemned as a witch.
Yeah.
So a really, really, really important text in the history of occult studies and I say like gender studies, especially considering women as others, is really a common theme from this period on, and even goes as far back as the medieval times in terms of persecuting women as sort of like sirens or sorceresses or witches, whatever it may be. So really, really fascinating text, especially when you're thinking about the Pope, already decreeing that you shall not suffer a cat to live. Well, he also says in this text a clear indication of a witch is that she has a cat.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
I have two. I don't know. I'm just saying this is really scary times to be living in.
If we apply this text to now, yes, I would think so.
But those are kind of some of the rules he lays out, right? Like if you see a woman with a witch who maybe is not as devout, who's doing weird things in public, or like is being promiscuous with other men who are in the town, then you should get them and deal with them as he describes.
Oh, so it is like today. So So okay. It hasn't. Okay.
All right, I can probably talk about this forever, but also if anyone is interested, all of these things are available for research.
Yeah.
And you can definitely come in and, I mean, really, we have a super nice collection of witchcraft books, starting from this all the way to like the 20th century.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in this topic, there is definitely more to research and more to look through with our collections.
And just a side note, did you know about the small book section?
I did not.
So to find this, we didn't realize there was a small book section in our special collections for obviously small books. But I immediately saw some stuff that might come to a next unboxing if we do things on animals, because there was like an Edward Gorey, which I guess could have been used but it wasn't a spooky book on little bugs. That was super cute. And then there was one about fussy cats. That was super cute.
Yes.
So
I see some people in our chat have cats as well. Yeah, that is same. So
yeah, I don't know why these librarians are admitting that they have cats on the chat.
Shocker. But yes, we're going to move on to the next book, which is also about witchcraft. This one's a little bit more expansive in that it's also discussing demons and sorcerers and alchemy.
I mean, if you're going to talk about witches, you might as well talk about demons, sorcerers, and alchemy.
So this is written by Grillet de Givry, and it was published in 1931. Interesting tie-in with the Catholic Church is that the author of this book was a very devout Catholic and also a scholar. So he wrote this book definitely, again, from a Christian perspective, looking back on the long history of witchcraft, magic, and alchemy, with the lens of how the Catholic Church described and dealt with these topics throughout their history. So that's another really interesting context, is that he himself was Catholic, and so he's very close to this topic in that, at least from my perspective, a lot of Catholics openly know that the church believes in demons and exorcisms and things like that. I mean, I, at least growing up in Catholic school, was told that there are priests who are regularly trained to do exorcisms. So he had sort of that perspective as a Catholic going into writing this type of text. It has 375 high-quality black and white illustrations, which are derived from manuscripts and texts throughout history. But the one that I pulled out a chapter that discusses pacts with demons throughout history. So this is the tip, like what is the phrase, like making a deal?
Pact with the devil.
Deal with the devil. Yeah. So he wrote a whole chapter on those who make deals with the devil, and what that means for their eternal life, which is so fascinating to me.
I wonder if he talks about Tenacious D in the Pick of Destiny.
So this one right here is a really cool image that I pulled to talk about.
Like, I feel like I recognize it.
It is pretty popular. So this image is from the Compendium Malefictorium, and it is a witch hunter's manual that was written in Latin by Francesco Maria Guzza and was published in 1608.
You're crushing the pronunciations, Taylor.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I practiced. But
yeah, we all did.
This is a reproduction, obviously. It's not the original. But like with the Jean Bodin text, this discusses witches, but unlike the Bodin text, discusses more specifically witches gain their powers through pacts with the devil. That is how they gain their power in this guide for witches. That was made in 1608, and he also describes detailed descriptions of witches' powers and their poisons. So a side note of his text is also how you can identify demons, who might be making deals with witches,
as one demon does.
Right. Yeah. So in this photo, it's captioned, "The devil forces a pact on those who have made him appear." This is depicting the earliest known, at least according to the author, the earliest known pact that was made with the devil.
Interesting.
And it was Theophilus, who was a part of the church in northern Sicily at the time in the year 538. his bishop had kicked him out of the church, basically said you can no longer be a member
Sure.
of a priest and sort of an authority figure in the church. And in order to recover that position in the church, he sold his soul.
Got it.
So that's what's depicted in this image here. He sort of...
That's what I would do.
Well, debatable. But but on the left-hand side is the devil.
Yeah.
And Theophilus is on the right with his presumably his family. And behind him in his hands is the pact itself that he's trying to like keep away from the devil, because the second that the devil has it in his hands, the deal is done.
It's done. Got it. Oh, okay.
So that's just a really interesting look back at how far this sort of lore about whether or not you can make a deal with the devil and what that could do for you, but also what the consequences are, right? Because eventually the sort of reference I got here was that he would be taken from his family, and his eternal soul will not be reunited with them. That's sort of the context they're making by putting him next to his family.
Oh,
yeah. Otherwise, why would he be there? Exactly. I mean, at least that's the way I interpreted it. So
no, I see that. At first, I was like, "Why? He's definitely a family man. He's bringing everyone to the devil pact.
He's bringing everyone
but
into it."
Symbolically, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. And then there's another really interesting image in the next page. So I don't know if anyone's heard of Rumpelstiltskin, probably, but another common theme throughout this sort of folklore was that sometimes parents would make pacts with a demon or devil for some reason or the other, and then their child would be given for that. So in this image and in this chapter here on the left, this family was this mother and father were not able to conceive naturally. Okay. So they made a pact with this horrific looking demon on the right. It's
like a mixture of a dragon and like a chicken.
Bigfoot.
And Bigfoot is definitely in there, like a lizard person.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's really horrifying, actually. But they made a deal with this demon that if he could help them conceive naturally, or unnaturally, however you want to view that, then at a certain point in the child's life, the demon would take possession of the kid. Okay. So that's what's happening in this scene and in this story that Givry's talking about. You can see the on the right side, the demon is actually like has one hand on the child, and the parents have a hand on the other. So they're really trying to stop him from stealing them.
I don't know if it's because of the etching, but I mean that child looks like it has a 5 o'clock shadow. So I mean, it looks like he had a long time, a lot of time with his parents.
Do you think he had time?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, they're not even holding him. They're just like.
Oh wait, really?
Yeah, his other hand is just like waving.
Oh,
and
right.
And the.
It looks like
dad,
he's waving him away.
Yeah, and then like the dad is just like here, and the mom's like here. They look more. They are the calmest people in this composition.
You're actually right. The child looks terrified, and the parents look pretty calm.
Even the demon looks like incredulous. Like what? This was easy.
Yeah.
So, that I had no idea about this the folklore though. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and this is a German work from 1498. So, what this whole text really shows you also is how long demons have had a connection to the church, and like how long the church has recognized that these supernatural forces are in our lives and potentially changing the course of our lives through these various pacts or through exposure to their evil or anything like that. The church actively has believed for most of its history that demons are real. And while we were researching demon exorcisms, I do have to throw out this not so fun fact. 51% of Americans believe in they believe that demons exist and that you can exorcise them. Was that surprising to you?
No. I was like, if anything, I was a little bit more surprised it wasn't a higher number.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I don't know.
Have you seen the show Evil?
No.
It's basically about, like, that's why I was like, it's on, like, CBS, or now it's on Paramount Plus, but it is a show about, like, demonic possession.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, but 51% of Americans, as of a poll done in 2013.
It'd be interesting to see, like,
if it's changed.
If it's in, like, it's been almost 10 years.
Yeah. Okay. So next, we're going to do this one.
So I think this is a very interesting item, just because it is not, it's basically an item about a very fascinating item. So this is Christie, the auction house in New York. This is their catalog for when they, in the early 2000s, 2002, yeah. Someone found the original typeface of Bram Stoker's Dracula in 1980. It was basically thought to have been lost for over 100 years, and so it was found, and then it was sold at auction. They assumed they would get around $1.4 million for it. It didn't even reach the reserve price, so it actually didn't get auctioned off for this. But it's a really interesting monograph. That the monograph itself, the Christie's catalog talks about, like, the history of Dracula and the importance of Dracula in literature, in art, in film. And so honestly, the item itself is super interesting and lovely to go through it. You can see, so I didn't know this, and you said you did.
I did not know that.
So I didn't realize that the original title for Dracula was The Undead, and apparently in my research I found out that he changed it, like, right before the publication. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if there's any, like, old copies of unpublished Dracula that's called The Undead. But yeah, it's got so the catalog itself has images from the text. It has let me see, it has a couple, like, photos from the manuscript, like right here. This is, like, a preliminary note written by Stoker about, like, how to, like, understand and read Dracula, talking about the different stories, how they kind of, like, come together to create the actual folktale, the actual thing of Dracula. This is Edvard Munch is one of my favorite painters. This is his lithograph they put in here of Vampire. Right here is a picture of the manuscript where it's Dracula, Harker meeting Dracula for the first time. So it says, "Welcome to my house. Enter freely of your own will. He made no motion of stepping to me, but stood like a statue, as though the gesture of welcome had fixed him into stone." So yeah, it's really cool to see. I always love manuscripts. That's one of my favorite things of working in special collections, and we have collections of a few faculty here, and seeing their manuscripts with, like, little comma and editing mark. I think it's so amazing to see their process of how they got to the final product. Which one's this one? Let me see. There's another section. As you can see, they have a lot of... here's a really interesting thing. Here's a list of the different characters, that Stoker's own list of the different characters from Dracula.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, let me see.
How much was this supposed to sell for?
$1.4 million, and it didn't reach, like, the bottom where, like, who was selling it was like, I need at least this for it to actually go, and they didn't even reach it. So but yeah, it has, like, Mina's encounter with Dracula for the first time in here, which I didn't really realize, and they put it into context. See, you can see here at the end of sale, like, they estimated for $1 million, between $1 million to 1.5.
Wow, okay.
They definitely didn't get that. But I didn't realize that second to Sherlock Holmes, Dracula is the most filmed character, just in general. Sherlock Holmes #1, but Dracula's 2.
What's interesting to me is, okay, so this is to sell something, right? This is to sell
Yeah.
a manuscript. I don't buy it. Like, I mean, obviously, no one wanted to buy it.
Yeah, you're not wrong then.
But a lot of what we talk about in archives is authenticity and sort of provenance.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were just looking at this far away, maybe, like, distantly somewhere else, and I had not visibly seen the manuscript and, talked to people that indicated it was exactly what they said it is, I just don't know that pictures of it is enough to convince someone, because a lot of what we talk about too is how tangible researching and working in the archives is. Like, you need to touch the material, you need to develop that sort of connection to it physically and otherwise. And to me, if this is how they tried to sell it without actually showing people.
So you think there should have been? Do you think there should have been more photos, like more like imagery from the thing? I know what you're saying because I've also.
I think so. Yeah. I wish they had really given us more of that experience. I guess that tactile experience,
or more why this is so important instead of just putting the context of like
right.
Dracula generally.
Right. Exactly.
I get that. I 100% because I would also be like, how was this missing for 100 years and how did suddenly appear?
Yeah. Like, what is the story here? Like, stories are also very important in the archives. And, like, you know, explaining to people the historical significance sometimes is not enough. You also have to have them experience it in their own way.
Or like you were saying, like the story of the actual like item and like how it got to where it's going. Not just Dracula itself, but just like the actual artifact.
When you were scrolling through this, I did see a reference to Frankenstein in here, going back to one of our first books. But apparently, somebody was writing a letter to review the book to her son, and she wrote, "No book since Mrs. Shelley's Frankenstein, or indeed any others, has come near yours in originality or terror." So that was Mrs. Stoker. That was his wife. So she was commenting on the originality of that work at the time. See, that's the stuff I want to see. Show me that letter.
Sure,
Show me the original manuscript, and it's sold. Maybe if I had $1 million.
Yeah, that's the other part.
Yeah, so it's just a really interesting sort of like meta moment where you're looking at something that's not what it is.
100%.
To convince someone to buy it. It's like online shopping, right? You know, like you don't know what you're buying really until it's there.
Until you can see it. Yeah. Okay. So this is our last piece. This is actually the first piece I pulled that I want to talk about. We have this just beautiful illustration of Edgar Allan Poe's work. Let me pull it out. Do you want to grab the? Yeah. So this is a published edition of Tales of Mystery and Imagination by Edgar Allan Poe. Yeah, with illustrations from Harry Clarke. So Harry Clarke is a Irish stained glass artist and book illustrator born in Dublin. He is a prominent figure in the Irish arts and crafts scene of that time. And his work eventually, I don't know, it's harder to see up front, but his work eventually like influenced like Art Deco and the Art Nouveau movement. But so when this was originally published in 1919, it was only black and white, and so you can still kind of see some of the original black and white ones that he did. But this edition has these just gorgeous like color. Some of them look like stained glass, but you can see kind of his, like right here is a good example. Like this would have been in the original publication, and this is something that was added later. And so this is a posthumously created like collection of stories for Edgar Allan Poe, and it's considered like the first complete collection of his work. And there's 2 stories in here: The Murderers of Rue Morgue and The Descent into the Maelstrom. This is where they were first published, and they're both pretty like important pieces of Poe's work in the sense of, so The Murderers in Rue Morgue was considered like the first detective story. It predates Sherlock Holmes, but basically it's about a French detective who like solves the case of a brutal murder. And a lot of the archetypes that you find in Sherlock Holmes and Agatha Christie's Poirot can kind of be found in these stories. The other one, The Descent into the Maelstrom, is a tale of a man who like recounts a tale of being like shipwrecked and being just stuck in a whirlpool in the ocean. And this is an early form of science fiction. I can just by the notion of the idea of like just being stuck in a whirlwind is very kind of Lovecraftian kind of story. And so, but the images are just, let me pull. Wow. Oh, so here's a black and white one. That's that would, beautiful. Yeah, it's just like, and you can see the Art Nouveau like influence that came to be. Let's see if I'm forgetting anything.
So you said the illustrator of the color images was a stained glass.
Yeah,
artist?
and it's the same one, and he also did book illustrations. So when he first did it, he did both. Like he did this and this. But I think this is a later edition that that the publisher was able to add color illustrations. So yeah, you see these very similar, like we said, we're going to end it with illustrations that kind of bring stories to life. So very similar to the cut of Lynn Ward. But yeah, I could just sit in like a warm chair with a warm cup of coffee and just read all the stories in here and look at these
cool too.
These super beautiful illustrations.
Did you read Poe in high school or growing up? Were you?
I didn't. I really do think I know about the Raven because of the Simpsons Treehouse Horror episode.
Love that for you. Yeah.
It doesn't have one of my favorite. I don't think it has like. Does it have? No, the cat. The cat.
Telltale Heart.
Yeah, it doesn't have that. It does have the Fall of Usher.
Morella's good. I like that one. Yeah, I feel like I was naturally drawn to these type of stories as a kid. Again, concerning. But
you have 2 cats.
I do have 2 cats. I've read most of these.
Yeah.
Because I feel like also when you're an English major, Poe is like Poe, you know?
Sure, yeah.
So iconic. So when also we were discussing what we're going to do for this, I was like, well, we have to do something Poe. You know, like nothing invokes spooky season more
the Black Cat
than cats and Poe. So I was really pleased to see this, and the illustrations are just the cherry on top. It's so beautiful.
Just so beautiful.
Bon. Oh, that one's pretty.
Yeah. This almost looks like it could have come in like a Game of Thrones like imagery.
Yeah.
Super like fantastical.
Alrighty, well, I think that's all we had for today in terms of items. I want to thank everyone for joining us today with our Halloween Spooky Spectacular stream. And please stay tuned on the library's calendar events pages and the SCRC Twitter. We will be announcing when we will have our next stream.
The next stream will be the textile one, right?
Oh, right, yes. The next stream is actually coming up very soon. It is November 17th, and Phil and I will be back again without costumes. Actually, we will have costumes.
We'll have videos of us in costumes because we're not scientists.
We will have costumes, but Phil and I recently were able to collaborate with some library staff and film a portion of our next stream in the Public Sciences Lab on campus. So if you'd like to learn more about dyeing with natural fabrics and natural dyes, we will be doing a premiere of that recording and then a live panel discussion with a textile professor. So we're really excited about that.
It's going to be dope.
And yeah, thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for joining us, and have a spooky day.
Spooky, spooky day.
Yeah.